We have a massive Brad Marchand trade talks update, as a recent report from Chris Johnston has revealed that the Bruins may choose to make an absolutely insane decision if the season does not turn around under new head coach Joe Sacco. We're going to be talking about how ridiculous this report is, as well as some recent roster moves that the Boston Bruins have made that are really going to change up this season as well. Now, before we get into all of this news here, we know that 75% of you guys watching right now are not subscribed to the channel. If you're looking for a spot to get all of your Boston Bruins news, you're in the right spot. Hit the sub button, join me here on the channel. We're covering everything Boston Bruins related, but without any further ado, we need to get into these absolutely ridiculous reports from Chris Johnston stating that the Boston Bruins could be shopping Brad Marchand if the season does not get turned around, and this is in result of him being added to the TSN Big Board, which is, of course, trade targets from getting closer to the trade deadline around the NHL, and this is the report from Chris Johnston and what he had to say on the topic. This is not a player we expected to find on the big board, even if he's currently playing out the final year of his contract. But as league sources noted this week, I don't think anyone in Boston thought this is where they'd be at. If the decision to replace Jim Montgomery with Joe Sacco behind the Bruins bench doesn't produce the desired results, some difficult personnel decisions will almost certainly follow. This is a very big report from Chris Johnston, as you see there, Brad Marchand could be one of these guys who gets moved in the result of having a really bad season, continuing to what we've seen play out for this season so far, and we know that the coaching change was necessary. That was something that was bound to happen. As I've mentioned, it's easier to fire the coach than it is to fire the players and do an in-season GM move. So Jim Montgomery definitely got the short end of the stick, but it was a move that ultimately, in our first game, worked out. We saw Joe Sacco get the win, 1-0 in our first game, but having the possibility of Brad Marchand, our captain, the captain that we've had for quite some time after Zadorov, Zdeno Chara, Patrice Bergeron, the legends from this team. Brad Marchand was the one to follow, and now, just because we're having a bad season, the final year of his deal, the heart and soul of this team, Brad Marchand's been placed on a trade list from TSN. This is absolutely ridiculous, folks, and I don't know where and how this can come to fruition. And looking at Brad Marchand's contract, of course, the $6 million, just over $6 million on the final year of his deal, we can almost guarantee that at the age of 36, going on 37, and he's going to be 37 when this contract is expired, we can guarantee that Brad Marchand is going to be a Boston Bruin for life. There's no doubt in my mind that that's what we're going to see. We know that Brad Marchand definitely has been struggling the past few seasons. That's been no surprise, but we also have to bring in his injury history and everything like that. Just natural aging of an NHL player. Those are going to have major impact on a guy like Brad Marchand, who puts his body on the line every single game. And another big part of this as well is he's not going to be making $6 million next season. I think that's a big part that the Bruins are going to consider, as well as maybe a 2 to 3 year or a 2 to 3 year, $2 to $3 million contract that will kind of finish off Brad Marchand's career in the NHL. And for a 36-year-old going on 37, he does not play like a 36, 37-year-old. And I can guarantee you that he is well above and well suited to become one of these players that are going to play well into their 30s and 40s if things do continue, and he does continue to, of course, stay healthy, which being the main priority. But having his name being on the trade list ahead of guys like Morgan Geekie, Charlie Coyle, Brandon Carlo, Trent Frederic, a lot of these guys who have been in trade reports, in trade talks so far this season, even if the Bruins do continue to get better, those guys are surely going to be ones that are going to be on the list simply because of their play, the amount of depth we have in these positions, their contracts. Many things are piling on top of these guys to kind of be forced out of the Boston Bruins system, and frankly, Brad Marchand is not one of those players. And of course, we have another one here from Connor Ryan, talking about Brad Marchand, his leadership, and what he had to say on the changes of Joe Sacco in his first game. He said, "It always feels different when there's a new head coach on the bench. There's a couple of good things that we tweaked. Mindset, I think, were the biggest things." So immediately, we already seen the reaction of Brad Marchand here. We've seen the reaction of the team. Felt better. It looks good. It seems more like the Boston Bruins that we've been seeing over the past few seasons, already in the first game of Joe Sacco's tenure. And as well, kind of going into Brad Marchand once again, we know that he hasn't been the strongest player this season or the past few seasons, but 14 points in 21 games is still a very, very good, pace of points for the 36 going on 37-year-old in the final year of his deal. And he's still pushing for that big contract that he really hasn't had in his career, the big, figure contract, but ultimately the way the Boston Bruins are playing out, the way that we've kind of built this team right now, and the way it looks and the outcome, we're really not going to see Brad Marchand make those figures. So it is interesting to see Brad Marchand on these lists. Do I think he's going to be traded? Absolutely not. I think things seriously need to go down the gutter for that to happen. And the way that at least our first game with Joe Sacco looked, it looked like we're trending in the right direction for this second half, or going into the second half of the season. So let me know what you think about these reports. Obviously something that a lot of Bruins fans are going to tear apart Chris Johnston for, but ultimately, he's not the one making these lists. He's the one reporting it, and there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff to come for the rest of the season and see if we actually do have Brad Marchand on some ridiculous trade list. But going into the second topic here of the videos, they've made a few sneaky roster moves over the past few days, and this one after yesterday's game, heading into our second game with Joe Sacco, has created a lot of buzz around the Boston Bruins community and the fan base, and wondering why this move was really made ahead of our next game. And this is a very interesting one as well, and I do have it here so you can see both. I know it's a bit small, but I do apologize. But Bruins have assigned to Providence Georgii Merkulov and recalled from Providence Marc McLaughlin. So we've been discussing here in the past few videos that the Bruins are likely just going to make a few swaps here for some younger guys in the AHL to bring them up and see if they can really find something that will spark more offense. And we've seen some success from Georgii Merkulov over his 3 games in the NHL, but his time is done here, and a lot of people are saying that we don't see any more success that he can have in the AHL. He's already been very, very good in the AHL, and we hope that he will eventually stay in the NHL, but right now, being sent down, and I don't believe he will be there very long. I think this is something temporary just to get some new bodies, some fresh faces in the NHL, and in this case, Marc McLaughlin, I think is a very good one to at least experiment with for a few games. And looking at Marc McLaughlin's stats here, as you can see, 10 points in 15 games in the AHL this season. One of the better players that we've experienced here in Providence so far this season. I think it's going to be a good attempt to see what he can do in the NHL level. And at 25 years old, there's another possibility of him being able to stay in the NHL for quite some time. Potentially kind of make his mark there and get a full-time position, because we know there's lots of guys that can be moved out, there's lots of young faces that can be moved in, and it's only a matter of time, I think, until we actually see some of these play out. And of course, looking at Marc McLaughlin, looking at the way he's been playing in Providence, his game perfectly suits the Bruins NHL level, and I think that's something that the Bruins are kind of looking for as well, some more additions to make into this roster to finally make it feel complete. And we know that Joe Sacco can bring some new level to some of these guys' games, and I think that's a big part of what Jim Montgomery couldn't do for these players. So I'm very excited to see how Marc McLaughlin looks at the NHL level. Yet to see where he's going to go, how he's going to look in any of these positions. Don't know the lines, as we haven't had a full practice with him in there yet. But Georgii Merkulov sent down. We have Marc McLaughlin coming up, and I expect to see some more young faces in the NHL at some point soon. So let me know what you think about all of this news. Obviously, a lot of big stuff coming from the Boston Bruins, but that's all I got. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great day. See you later.